it's live as well, so nobody
Awesome.
nobody sees a delay. Yeah, you guys are humming, eh? The new site looks good.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we
Mm,
just launched that. I'm excited, man.
yeah, lot of work, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much you want to talk about that today, but I'm happy to discuss whatever you prefer. I looked at the question just now, so I'm up to getting this conversation in whatever direction you want to go with. The platform is kind of like it's very new. We're still testing stuff, but yeah, we'll see. I'm not sure I'm even ready to talk too much about it because I'm still figuring it out. To be honest, it's kind of like just out there. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
well,
excited.
whatever. I mean, it's talk to it as much as you want. I'll kind of lead into it near the end, and then you can talk about it
Cool.
as if it's a future product that's like in beta testing. That's totally fine. Just let people know. I mean, it just from a user's
Oh
perspective.
no, it's live. Just say it's live. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all good.
Um,
It's
the
live, but
other
it's just like yeah.
Cool. The other thing I do is when you're talking a little bit, I can flip to you like this, so we have your branding, and then
Okay,
also
cool.
like if I'm asking questions, I can flip to myself. So
Nice.
just so you don't get shocked by it, because sometimes I forget to tell people, and they're like, "Oh, it's just me." So anyway,
Cool. Cool. Good
okay,
stuff, man.
cool. Well, let's dive into this a little bit, and then we'll see how she goes. So I'll welcome
Let's
you to
do
the
it.
summit. Moran, welcome to the summit. I'm happy to have you here.
Thanks, man. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, for the way of background, you are the CEO and founder of Acquisitions.com. People may recognize you from your YouTube channel or seeing you on YouTube because and you can talk to us a little bit about it, but you're quite passionate about bringing entrepreneurs into the space through the process of acquisition, so they can grow that way. And I don't know, it's just an easier way potentially than like starting from scratch. So I know that's your thing, and it's really cool. So I wouldn't mind if you just told the attendees a little bit of background on how you got into the M&A space.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think I accidentally um, came into this place. Like I did my first deal without even knowing what M&A is. I bought an app company using seller financing, and since I got hooked. But then moving forward, as I grew as I guess as I grew as a human being in this world, I realized that I think there's something deeper in me that really um, drawing me into this space of acquisitions. Like there's something bigger that I just can't explain. That I'm just like so hooked to this space of acquisitions, and I think it's even started with my mother and father. It was kind of like my parents divorced when I was young, and I remember seeing my father trying to start different businesses and struggling like with startups. So when I've done my first deal and I realized I can grow by years worth of sales in an afternoon, literally, um, I think it helped me realize that I can help solve those struggles and pains for potentially for other people as well. So I think that's where my real deep passion to that space is from. If you really want to go deep here, yeah.
Well, I think it's like, I mean, everybody in the attendees that are going to be attending, for the most part, they probably started their companies from scratch, so they can resonate with what you're saying. I mean, you throw stuff against the wall and like, oh, it doesn't stick. And you throw stuff, and it can be a really big challenge, right? And now that we have this ecosystem that's been built up, and there's lots of businesses that are available, and a huge amount of transfer happening, I really appreciate what you're doing, bringing people into the space through acquisition. So it's kind of cool, and it's nice for people to know the background. So our conversation today is, what do buyers screen for when making an offer? And I think it's a topic that we can have a nice dialogue around, because part of what your business does is train people how to screen businesses to make sure that they're acquiring businesses that are going to support them into the future. So just kind of high level to start, what would you think is the biggest thing for people to watch out for when they're from the buyer side, when they're buying? And this is going to help our attendees, because they're on the other side. They can then put themselves in the shoes of the buyer.
So what the buyer's looking for when he's looking to buy a business? Yeah,
Yeah, well,
there's a lot
what's
of
the flags? Which they that you train the people to look for when they're purchasing companies?
yeah. It's good question. I think in the end of the day, it comes down to I mean, what is a business? About coming, just we need to ask ourselves what is a good business. In the end of the day, a buyer is looking for a good business that will hopefully make him more money, and provide him with not just income but the lifestyle and impact that he wants to have, that maybe he can't get at a job or with a startup. And now the question is, what that needs to look like when you're looking to buy a business, right? What that needs to look like so a buyer will have those three things: income, impact, and lifestyle. That, like, can that business provide it to them? And it comes down to simple things. If you want to go to the nuances, it's kind of like, does the business have recurring revenue, so it de-risk kind of like some of the risk for the buyer? How much the business is dependent on the owner or on one client or supplier or employee. What kind of skills the buyer needs to have in order to run that business,
Mhm.
or does the business have enough cash flow to hire someone else to run the day to day? So a lot of nuances like that. What's the upside potential for the business? I think that's important for a buyer to see. Hey, am I buying here something that is going to go down, or have a potential to also increase and make me more of those three things: more income, more lifestyle, lifestyle, better impact.
Mhm.
um, and I can dive into each of those as well. But in the end of the day, it comes down to the business. Is the business good enough? Is it providing a good service or product? And does the employees have kind of like a sense of purpose towards one mission and a vision in that business? I think that's what business is in the end of the day.
For sure. And that I wouldn't, we'll maybe pull a couple of those things out. One of them I'm interested in is the buyer. What is, as far as the buyer is concerned, where are they usually getting cagey? Does it come in around their ability to operate the company? And then if that's the case, like what would you suggest attendees to give security to that buyer so they move forward with the deal?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the end of the day, when I'm looking at the business that when it's one of my clients want to run a business, he needs to ask himself, does he have the skill to run the business, right? But my belief is that most of the businesses that are for sale, it's not like they're to run those businesses. You need to be a rocket science or
Yeah.
something like that. It's kind of like it's basics understanding of many times just being a leader of people. That's what business in the end of the day. It's can you be a leader of people? Because I believe that if someone is determined and is motivated enough, he can learn the skills. So it's more about, can you lead a team of people, and are you curious and motivated enough to learn about the sector, to understand the nuances of that business? um, that's I think what is more important. And obviously for the buyer, in the end of the day, it comes down to what the buyer wants, and some people have, everyone have their own kind of like things that they're looking at. It comes down to kind of like, what is their passion, what is their background, what they're curious and passionate about, and where they want to be, like what they want to do for the rest of their life sometimes,
Yeah.
you know
That leadership component, do you think that can be trained, or is that trying to find the people that already have that within them?
it's a good question. I think it can be trained, but obviously some people have different learning curves than others. I would
Mhm.
say that.
Yeah, I mean, I ask and kind of dig into this because I just know, like, from my experience too, it's like those individuals that they're making that first acquisition in their life. Maybe they're moving from being an employer or employee, sorry, and maybe they've been a manager, they've been worked a little bit higher in the C-suite, but really making that shift over to being the entrepreneur and the leader of the organization, it can be challenging. And I think for the sellers, it's hard for them to picture that because they've been in the business for so long. And so it's difficult to resonate. It's like, why is this person taking so long to acquire the company, or why is it that they're having challenges? And I think often the challenges literally come from just making that personal shift and growth to be like becoming the leader.
Yep, I agree 100%. That's why, and sometimes someone told me in the past that you can really know a person after you know him for like 2 years. So from the seller perspective, it's not easy to know if the person can really be a good fit to 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 replace you. But
Mhm.
um, I think that's why having a period where you build a rapport with the buyer or seller, depends on what side we're talking about. I think it's very important to kind of like, if you're on the seller perspective, to realize, okay, what's the real motive of that buyer? Is he out there really being curious about me, my business? Is he really asking questions and have And based on questions that someone's asking, you can understand what his purpose and motive is, and to really
Mhm.
understand, hey, can that person really think about things outside of himself? Because I think being a leader comes down many times to just thinking about others versus just yourself. So
Mhm.
from the seller perspective, I think just trying to sense that from others, like is he out there to help others, the community, the employees, the customers, as much as he want to care about himself for making more money and things like that.
I think that's really good advice, actually, just for the attendees. It's like when you're dealing with a potential buyer, listening to the questions they're asking, and are those questions, more selfish in nature? Or are they really looking for, the people in the organization, what that organization is going to look like moving forward, and a little bit more of the higher level thought process than just what's in it for me. I think that's a big part of like determining if they are a leader, right?
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. 100%.
I wouldn't mind shifting over to a little bit to process for you guys, and maybe kind of what you train your clients into for the acquisition. So that I think one of the big things that's difficult about buying or selling a company is kind of not understanding the process. So I wouldn't mind walking through that. And I know that the companies that you normally work with, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but definitely for the people that you train are kind of in that, definitely kind of below the lower middle market in that, would you say that, 5 million below zone?
I would say between 1 to 5 is kind of like our sweet spot for sure. But we have
Yeah.
clients who bought businesses doing 30 million a year.
Mhm.
Um, so we have but yeah, definitely the sweet spot is 1 to 5.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think I'm finding that, I mean, through our summit interviewing, like, this is probably the 26th or 27th interview I've done, but it seems to be that that's the case, right? And it's indicative of the marketplace. It's like you have these larger companies that are out there, but the vast majority of the businesses are below that, $5 million mark, and really kind of below that $2 million mark. So that's really where a lot of transactions end up occurring. So I think that if we can dive into the process, I mean, from your side, like from the buy side's perspective of what it looks like acquiring a company, that could potentially be helpful for attendees.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to. So it starts with really realizing who is the buyer, what he's looking to achieve, kind of like understanding what are is like what is his background, who he knows, like his contacts, his experience, his passion, his curiosity,
Mhm.
and to start there with realizing, okay, what's the best sector for that person, right? Obviously, understanding his kind of like financial situation and how much he's willing to invest or have access to capital, and from that understanding, kind of like what's the ideal deal size that we probably want to pursue with him. And then I like to tell my clients, like, ask yourself, like, do you really want to own this business? Like, if tomorrow I wrote about you on Forbes and you were kind of like on the Forbes magazine, do you want your name to be, attached to a business like that? Are you excited telling your family, your mom, your wife, whatever it is for you, to that you are the owner of that business? So it starts with simple things like that, and then obviously we start to go out there and look for deals, and there's a whole process just for that. If you go directly to the business owners, and that's kind of like creating different marketing campaigns in different ways, or going through a broker. um, I don't know how much you want me to expand here, but it's,
No, I wouldn't
each of
mind.
those
Like we
marketing
can
campaigns.
just kind of dive into those spots because I think, okay, there's different ways for acquiring the company and even finding the deals, right? And
Yeah.
from an attendee's perspective, it's like, okay, where should they be as a business owner? Where should they putting themselves so that they can be found by potential buyers? So it'd be interesting to know, like, where you guys are looking.
Yeah, so in terms of finding buyers, it's definitely, I mean, brokers is definitely one way, right? But when I'm working on the buy side, I'm definitely letting my clients know that if you're working with brokers, like, expect it to be a very, like, it's a different process than going directly and talk directly to the business owner, right? Like when you're talking directly to the business owners, you have usually more time to build rapport, get to know the business, get to know the owner. And I think it's something for business owners to understand that, um, there's less pressure on getting the deal done that can many times be, beneficial usually for the buyer, right? Because from the sell side, for the seller, usually you want to have lots of different offers from different potential buyers, if it's from,
Mhm.
even competitors or private, investors or private equity firms. But for my clients, for buyers, I usually tell them ideally you want to go directly to business owners, and whatever ways business owners are getting clients, those are the ways to get in touch with business owners. It can be anywhere from different direct marketing campaigns or social media or events when we used to have them in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
past, or anything you can think about to get clients. You can go out there and get in touch with business owners to potentially acquire them as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to say that. So it's going through using a broker, it really does make the process move faster, but you lose that element of being able to connect and develop rapport directly with the owner, which is totally true, right? Because you have that
Yeah.
intermediary in the middle. And I'm sure well, I definitely know, like there's pluses and minuses to it, right? And a lot of like some of the people I've been talking to say, oh, the plus of it is that you're dealing with a committed seller. Like by the time that they've gotten partnered with a broker, they are really committed to selling their company. So you like remove that. But I haven't really thought about the rapport side of things, which is interesting. So that's good to hear you say that. Hmm. Okay, so then they found the business, potentially they're working
Oh
with.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so yeah. So in terms of next steps, I mean, when they found the business, I usually if we, I think rapport got a lot to do with it. Like ask a lot of questions, realize like who you're talking to. In the end of the day, acquisitions, doing deals, it's people to people. Businesses. In the end of the day, it's one person doing business with someone else. So realize like who's that person. Some owners will allow you to talk to their employees, their suppliers, even. So, like, start to understand what business you're getting yourself into, and who are the people. I think that are running that business right now, and ask yourself, like, first of all, do you like those people?
Hmm.
Um, I think because if you're going to be the owner of the business, you're probably going to be a lot with those people. So ask yourself,
Yeah.
like, do you see yourself being day to day with those people? Do you appreciate them, respect them? You think you can learn from them? Can they learn from you? Can you bring something to the table to that business? If it's creating a potential upside or saving costs on that business. And obviously then we help our clients like with everything, with looking at financials, understanding what the business potentially can be worth, everything with financing, sending offers, eventually raising all the capital that you need and helping with the transaction, and hopefully transition with the owner to grow that business. And I can double click on each of those if you want, to help the viewers. But it's kind of like it's a very I like to say that buying a business is very simple, but it's not easy, right? There's a lot of nuances that you have in each of those steps that can be smooth and easy, but usually they're not, because you're dealing
Yes.
with people that, especially on the sell side, that some of those business owners own those businesses for 10, 20 plus years, and the
Hmm.
business is like their baby, and the employees are like their family, and
Hmm.
they want to make sure that they're being taken care of. So yeah, it's there's a lot of nuances involved, and I think that's what exciting about this world of doing deals and acquisitions, because usually every deal is a bit different.
Yeah, I think we will double click on a couple of those things. Like one I'm interested is how many businesses are you finding that need to be looked at before, on average, before that sweet one's found that's going to be that perfect match.
Yeah, good question. I don't think there's a real answer to that. Like we have clients who bought their first business they looked at. We have clients who had to look at 100, right?
Right.
And sometimes it's got nothing to do with the seller. It just comes down to the buyer and kind of like how clear he is,
Mhm.
um, with what he wants and what are his goals. And I think in life in general, people are not that clear on what they want. So I think
Right.
that's something bigger that I think we all need to deal with.
Yeah.
So I think usually every deal problem is in the end of the day just a reflection on the person that is about to do the deal.
Yeah, I think it's like saying it. The life in general, people don't always know what they want is completely accurate. And I find that from the sell side too, right? It's like people want to sell their companies because they have a level of, it's usually frustration, or maybe they need to retire. But oftentimes, especially if they're younger entrepreneurs, it's like, I'm just bored or burnt out or whatever it might be. But they don't necessarily know what's going to happen next. And I think that's an
Yeah.
exercise that needs to be done from the sell side, and even from like you said, from the buy side. It's like, okay, what is exactly you're trying to accomplish here? And then once people have clarity there, it allows them to move forward and take the next step. Okay, so some people are looking at one, some people are looking at 100, which makes sense. Everyone's a little bit different. And then when they, kind of zone in, say, yeah, I met with the owner, I kind of dug a little bit deeper, met with the staff, and or at least interact a little bit with the staff, and I kind of feel like this is going to be a potential match for me. What are you looking for from a documentation perspective before you guys can move forward that attendees or sellers should be prepared to have?
Yeah, so obviously the more the better, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
more things are organized, the more you can trust. Like it's funny how simple changes from the sell side can really increase the way you look at a deal. You know, just like can you arrange just basic financials? Sometimes that's difficult for business owners to get you, right? To like if we're talking to a seller, to a potential like to a business owner potentially looking to buy, and it takes them like I don't know, a few weeks to give you basic financials, just a basic like last 3 years of basic financials,
Mm-hmm.
P&L, balance sheet, then that's a red flag right away, right? It's like what's going on here,
Mm-hmm.
um, and like the more we have usually have just a list of things that we're sending a business owner, the more we can get, the better. Some owners are more, kind of like more open to sharing more before you
Mm-hmm.
have a signed LOI. Some sellers are less. I think on the first, like the initial due diligence, just to see that the business is organized and the numbers are clean
Yes.
and it's easy to access the financials as soon as possible. Obviously, after that, in the further due diligence, like can you see processes in the businesses? Can you see an actual business and not just like a like
Mm-hmm.
like the buyer want to see that he can buy a business and not a job inside of a business that is dependent on one person. I think the more you can present that and prove that to the potential buyer, the better chances you have to get a better deal with better terms.
Yeah, it's like I mean, that's a kind of pull that one out. It's like the buyer wants to purchase a business, they don't want to purchase a job. And the more I like that. Hmm.
Yeah, and even if they purchase a job, they need to just understand that that's what they're buying, and obviously the valuation is going to reflect that, right? Because when you're buying a job, it's going to be worth less for the seller.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the other thing that I would want to pull out of that, which is important, is that you have sellers that are really nervous to kind of call it open the books, or at least like show the potential buy around. And definitely, I find this when it comes to the point where they want to interact with the staff or want to communicate with some customers. Those seem to be the biggest barriers for sellers. When would you suggest like that should happen in the process? And then, yeah, let's just dig into that. Like, when would you suggest in the process that interaction happens between employees and also suppliers?
It's a really good question, and I can tell you that they have a reason to be worried.
Hmm.
I had a friend with I can tell you a few horror stories of people who thought they were about to sell their business, and then they found out that the competitor is just out there stealing their employees or trying to steal their employees and stealing their clients during
Hmm.
due diligence. When the seller thought he's about to get access to a capital, like an amount of capital that's going to change his life,
Hmm.
he's ending up with almost a business that's going to go down. So there is a reason to be worried. So I think having that interaction before you're going into due diligence, I think is crucial to understand like who you're working with. And sometimes you're going to be wrong, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, and it's very sad if it's your life work. Um, but then there's a saying that says like if you're trusting no if you can't trust anyone, like you can't really achieve anything. It's like, if you won't be able to trust anyone, you probably wouldn't have a business because you can't trust employees to help you. So um, there's it's an interesting situation where one side says that you have to open everything in the end of the day if you want to get a deal done, right? Like, and the bigger the deal, the more you'll need to open everything. Like private equity firms will dive into the nuance of the nuance, and they'll ask you questions about everything, so you have to, like, if you want to get a deal done. um but sometimes it's scary because like they don't have to do the deal
Hmm.
in due diligence. They can back out of the deal. So that's why I think for the seller side, on the seller side, I think it's crucial for them to have an interaction before that, to just realize who are the individuals you're talking to, and hopefully to have a gut instinct of knowing, okay, what's the real motive of that person? Is he out there to do hopefully something that won't hurt my business, or is he out there to potentially hurt my business? And
Mhm.
life is a life can surprise you sometimes in ways that you don't want, so I
Yes.
wish I had a simple answer for that, but it's like you have to open everything, but sometimes you can't control. So just do your best. That's all I can say. Do your best and trust people that you think are worthy of that trust.
I think it's a good answer because it really drills down to the core of you. If you're going to sell, you're going to have to open everything up. That's just a reality. At some point in the process, the last little piece that you think is never going to be overturned, it is going to be, right? So the kimono has to be completely open. Everyone's going to stand naked at some point. But the question is, okay, when do you actually do that? And I think your answer is good. It's like you have to use a bit of gut, for sure. That's just like part of it. And maybe you're doing some diligence on that buyer yourself in the background. But really, it's like having that connection with them and building that level of trust that everyone feels okay that they can move forward. And that has to happen regardless, right? And I think, I mean, I'll use this moment to kind of give a caution to sellers is like if you don't open up a little bit, maybe you're the one that's like not letting the trust build in the relationship, and that's what's going to kill your deal too, right? So it has to be it's this kind of dance back and forth. Um, but yeah, I mean, the gut comes into it for sure. And then what are you guys using as far as like what should sellers be expecting from your buyers with respect to documents for making offers? Like, is that an LOI? Is it an IOI? Is it kind of like a contract in the beginning that's a little bit more robust and binding? Like what does that look like? Because I also find for new sellers, it's like that's completely new to them. They just don't know how to even expect an offer to come.
So I've seen everything from people sending LOI right away to people sending like, something that isn't official at all, just like an offer in the email. Some people literally have a verbal offer on the phone. So all of the above. Like usually it's non-binding to begin with. That's kind of like so usually what we do with our clients is either an LOI right away, or just a very non-official offer to just see if there's even an LOI to even put out there, kind of like to see
Yes.
if we're even in the ballpark of doing anything. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, that's like I think that's accurate. It's like okay, you're it's interesting too. And I just really am trying to open people up to this world with this summit because everyone always thinks that there's like a specific way that stuff is supposed to be done. And I definitely find in this industry, in this world, there isn't. Like it can come as an email, the offer can come verbally, the offer can come as an IOI, an LOI, a term sheet, like whatever. It's like all sorts of different stuff
And
can
even be
come
sales
at.
and purchase agreement right away. Literally,
Yeah.
really depends on the deal. Really depends on the relationship before that. Really depends on the buyer and kind of like his experience or not. And yeah, it really it's all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you suggest then like whatever comes from the buyer, the way that they're most comfortable in interacting, that the seller kind of just work with that?
Yeah, I think the seller needs to work with that either way.
Yeah.
Definitely,
Okay.
it's
That's
kind
a
of
good
like I
point.
don't
Yeah.
think I have too many options, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think having some kind of when I'm looking at the buyer perspective, to have like an initial and nothing official, non-official offer, I think is good before you waste too much time on creating like a longer LOI
Mhm.
document. So I think it makes sense to just make sure everyone's not wasting too much time.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, either is fine in the end of the day.
Cool. Um, okay, I was gonna ask some questions about things that have killed deals. So I mean, you have lots of people you're working with, deals that you've done yourself, and these are the pitfalls that sellers and buyers need to watch out for. What have you come up in your experience that people should be keep an eye out for?
Um, So I think the biggest thing, if you're looking at the seller side, the business owner, is just different expectations. Kind of like what's the seller wants and what's the buyer wants. Kind of like there are people want like, I don't know, 10, 100x multiple on the revenues on
Yes.
I don't know, like a small manufacturing business,
Mm.
because they see Tesla being traded, I don't know how much right now.
Yeah.
That would scare a buyer away. I think that's the biggest thing, 100%.
Yeah. So I mean, the biggest thing's valuation, just being off on valuation,
Yeah.
not having the I called the box of reality. It's like, okay, the buyers live inside a box of reality because they are the market. And if the seller's outside of the box of reality, and I took this from Len Crick actually, so I can't claim ownership of this terminology, but and then everyone has to get inside the box of reality for it to work. So yeah, I mean, valuation is a huge one. And then, what other ones do you see pop up along the road that are, stopping people from having success?
I mean, on the buy side, it's usually just either the wrong deal, the wrong people, or financing. Simple as that. Financing or terms, right?
Mm.
That's what deals comes down to in the end of the day.
Okay. And then, is that I there, okay, so financing, let's pull those out. So it's like, okay, we have financing, that's an issue. Actually, that can maybe like segue us over to like the different kinds of deal structure because, that's a big thing that you guys do. But we have financing and then you have terms, and so the terms aren't agreed upon. What are you seeing some of those terms that kind of hang things up?
Um, so in terms of terms, so terms is kind of like, I guess, down on the list, because if you can agree on valuation, I think in the end of the day, if there's enough motivation from both sides, you can find the right terms.
Mhm.
Um, then so if you want to double click on that, it's kind of like, can the buyer come up with the money, and can the seller agree to terms that make sense for both sides, right? It's kind of like, and on the buyer side, like you mentioned, deal structures with our clients, like in the end of the day, most of those deal structures are just different ways for the buyer to come up with the money,
Yes.
um, either right away or over time, right? That's basically what those deal structures are out there. And sometimes it's coming up with more value, not necessarily money, right? Because when you're asking a seller like what they're going to do with their money, um, usually it comes down to something, right? Like we have money for something, to do something with it. And when the buyer can find out that something, he usually can bring that value, that isn't necessarily cash right away from his pocket. So that's kind of like what we help our clients usually, um, come up with. And it just a different way of looking at the deal and being creative and coming up with just more solutions, other than just like, okay, I'm going to give you my own cash out of my own pocket.
Hmm.
That's what it comes down to. But obviously there's got to be, there's two sides to that, right? The seller gotta agree to that, and then gotta be open to that. And in the end of the day, like you said, it's kind of like a back and forth play
Hmm.
of seeing who really wants to do the deal. Like, does both sides really want to do the deal or not?
Yeah. I think like from my side, it's you end up every seller so I have this questionnaire for sellers like when I meet them, and they fill out the questionnaire and it grabs like standard issue stuff, making sure they have their financials and their operating systems and their standard operating procedures, that kind of stuff. So you're grabbing the kind of the general basics. But one of the questions I ask is like, are you open to seller financing? Now, at this point, people normally don't even know what that means, and why should they if they're new to the space and selling their company for the first time. So I have a little descriptor in there. It says this is where you're gonna like lend a little bit of money to the buyer so that the deal can actually complete. And oftentimes that's just so it can like fill the gap between the valuation that the buyer's perceived value and the seller's perceived value, and like we're kind of filling that gap. And at the start, what happens is 100%. It's actually almost 100% right now that sellers go, I don't want to have anything to do with seller financing. It's like I want all the cash at close, and I want my price. And over the course of time, and this takes, sometimes it takes a failed deal, and sometimes it just takes like a little bit of, exhaustion and deal fatigue to get to the point where like, oh, okay, well, maybe we do need to be a little bit more flexible on the terms of this deal as far as how it's financed and structured. And then they come around and you end up having a deal that most people, like both sides, are happy with, but there is some creativity that gets put into it. So I wouldn't mind like talking a little bit about that, about what you guys have seen, like on the extreme ends, and maybe what's a little bit more normal, just so that people are aware, because I think it's our job here to introduce them to these new ideas so that their deals can be successful.
Yeah, I can dive into a lot of those different
Hmm.
structures. So obviously, there's the basic ones that I'm sure most heard about, like the seller financing that you mentioned, and earnouts that are dependent on milestones. Um, then, if we're talking U.S. businesses, obviously there's the SBA loans, and that's huge right now, right?
Hmm.
Because that's really helps on the, I think, on the seller side. But then there's more unique structures. Like, for example, one of our clients just bought a business using a rebate from a supplier of the business, of the acquisition target, right? So he got the money that was needed for the deal, that was like was satisfied for the seller, but it wasn't necessarily his cash,
Hmm.
right? So simple things like that. Obviously, um, uh, a lot of different asset lenders that can help out. It really depends also on what are the goals of the seller. Based on that, I can like maybe come up with and bring you some more of the ideas for structures. But for example, we have a lot of clients who just come to businesses, and just to give an example, like a business owner who is an engineer, for example, sometimes just want to stay in the business and continue to do his art,
Hmm.
the engineering work, but he doesn't necessarily want to do the business side of things, right? So um, we have clients who come in with their infrastructure for business, and they take care maybe or take a small percentage of the equity for bringing that infrastructure of business. You can
Hmm.
also see different, like the other way around, where someone just don't want to run the business anymore and is willing to give someone else equity. So let's say even if it's just 10-20% equity, then 20% equity to run the business,
Hmm.
and then the seller can retain most of the equity, but not necessarily be there day to day anymore. And then
Hmm.
they can create a structure where the seller is selling their share over time to that new CEO. So I think I can go through more of those structures, but I think it comes down in the end of the day to what the seller really wants and how much he really wants to sell his business. And I would say, if he wants to sell his business, why exactly he wants to sell his business. Because sometimes, like you said, it comes down to just some frustration
Hmm.
that doesn't necessarily that by getting the seller completely out of the business doesn't necessarily going to resolve that frustration. It's usually just going to end up with a different frustration somewhere else. So I think when a buyer and a seller can really ask themselves, like, what do I really want? Like I mentioned before, like getting that clarity on what do I really want from my life? What do I really want from business? Like,
Hmm.
and where do I see myself in that business day to day? I think when there's clarity from both sides, then you can come up with better creative structures, and also the understanding that um, the buyer is taking as much risk as the seller when he's buying a business, because by definition the seller knows more about the business than the buyer, period. So unless the seller understands that, like there's going to be some triggers in there that sometimes just you can't overcome. So I think there's, it's like any relationship, both sides needs to bring something to the table to create a deal in the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's like, I agree with you. I strongly agree with you, and I definitely agree with the sentiment that the buy side's taking an equal amount of risk. It, and arguably more. Like if you
Yeah.
like, they're the ones that are taking the burden moving forward, whatever that might look like. And the seller gets to say, okay, even if it is that I'm taking 50% of the cash up front off the table, I've now, that day that I get that check, it's like 50% of my risk is completely gone, right? And the buyer's now taking it on, they're moving forward with it. But I like how our conversation is like really, I feel like it's kind of centering around that point of everybody knowing exactly what it is that they want. And if the seller really knows truly what it is that they want, then a good deal can be structured around that, right? And all parties can be happy. But if they don't know what it is that they want, so, "Oh, I just want cash, I just want to sell my company because of some frustration," they might not win at the end of the day, because if the frustration is just, oh, you're dealing with your employees and it's a pain in the buns, and like your key staff person left and like now you have to replace them, so, "Oh, I'm tired of this business," that's not going to go away with whatever you do next. Like, you're going to replace it with having a problem of not having cash flow in your life because you don't have your company anymore, right? And now you have to replace that. So I think both parties need to do that deep dive up front And I think it's what I like about your company and what you guys are doing is you're kind of making the buy side do that deep dive first so they know where they're coming at. So at least 50% of the party is like knows and has clarity on what they need. And then hopefully the other side is, worked with someone or done that thought process on their own so that both people can come to the table and, really have a serious discussion about what a perfect partnership looks like at the end of the day. Yeah, I like that. Okay, where were we? So we talked about process, and we've talked about kind of the major deal killers. Um, we're talking about deal structure, yeah, for sure, and we dug into a few there for people. And then, what do I have here? From a seller's perspective, what would you advise company? Yeah, what would you advise people to watch out for? I know that the big thing that you said earlier was, okay, you want to make sure that your buyer is asking the right questions. That was one of the things that we kind of pulled out of our conversations. But is there anything else that you think, from the seller side that they can screen for and be like, okay, this is not going to be the buyer for me, the big red flags there?
I mean, obviously, having some background in that sector can help,
Hmm.
but I found out it's not that important as people think. Because,
Hmm.
like I said, it's not running a business. Small business is not rocket science. So it's more about the. I think business in the end of the day is all about personnel. Like, are you working with good people
Hmm.
who believe in a vision or a purpose that that business is living for?
Hmm.
Um, I think you can, if you can figure that out, like who are the people you really work with and what is their motive, it's bigger than anything else. Like obviously ask questions like what is their goal with the business, what they're going to do with it, what are their plans for the business, the basic questions that I'm sure most sellers already ask. But at the end of the day, if you fall on the wrong person, all those questions won't matter.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did my MBA. I did with the Jack Welch Management Institute, and Jack Welch has passed away, as you know. But in that period, I did get to communicate with him a couple times. So one of the questions I asked him, because they did like they were doing 300 some odd acquisitions a year when GE was on its massive growth curve, which like to me is just absolutely mind-boggling. And I asked him a similar question. It's like, what's the what was killing the deals, or what made a deal good or bad? And he said in the beginning they were very much like looking of his career. They were looking at the financial side of stuff pretty much exclusively. It's like, okay, is this going to add to our bottom line in the company? Can we be the number one in this particular category that we're acquiring? Then like let's charge forward. And then later, what he learned, having going through all these deals, is like they were missing the cultural element, right? And he said when that cultural element wasn't in alignment, then the deals would inevitably like they wouldn't work because you try to like integrate this into like the GE machine or whatever it might be, and it's just like it just kind of broke, right? Because there wasn't alignment. So I think like regardless of the size of the deal that people are working on, what you just said is completely accurate and really good advice that people should heed. It's like, okay, if it's a small business, it's like, do I just have alignment with the other owner? Like, can I fit into their shoes? Or if it's a little bit bigger, it's like, is that cultural piece going to be in alignment with my values are? Yeah, that's like I think you're right. I think that's probably what kills deals more than anything.
That's what probably kills business more than anything. We always say business dies from lack of cash flow or cash, but in the end of the day, why we don't have cash in the first place? And obviously, that's me assuming that there's um, like an actual legit service or product in the market. But if you have that, that's kind of like the basic. Then it's all about people. It's all about people, because if you have the right people, who are resourceful enough, they will find the right way of doing business, of getting sales, of doing the marketing, of having good operations with the right procedures and processes, and good financials, and everything in a business that every business needs.
Hmm.
But if you have the wrong people, you don't really have a business. That's why you see the biggest businesses in the world in the end of the day. That's why they have such a strict and sometimes very difficult hiring process, because they understand business is all about people in the end of the day. That's why you see companies like Google that became famous because of their hiring process that sometimes took,
Hmm.
I think, months before they even hired someone. But guess what? I guess there's a reason for them being so big and so successful, and same for all the other big companies.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Google, Facebook, all of those different big companies out there. It's not like they're like Facebook wasn't the first social
Hmm.
network company, right? Google wasn't the first search engine, but they were able to build some uniqueness that usually came from the people. And obviously, we're
Mm.
talking about small businesses here, but it's the same.
Yeah.
It's literally the same. It's all about the people. Are if the people are resourceful enough, committed enough, um, execute and produce enough, you'll have a good business. And even if it's not in that same sector, they will. You can pivot the business to somewhere to do something else if you have the right people. So both from the sell side and buy side, if you have the right people and you sell to the right person, he will grow the business, and then you won't be as worried about the seller financing part of things, right? Because be
Mhm.
like, oh, that person is amazing, is going to grow the business, so I better actually have some kind of an earnout involved as well because I want to have the upsides too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it's the wrong person, then it doesn't matter.
People. It's what it is at the end of the day, right?
It's
It's
all
like,
about people. Yeah,
yeah, I like Marcus Lemona's thing is like he's people, process,
people,
and then
process, product. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean it's true, right? So
yeah.
the okay, so the other thing I was going to ask, and this is one of your YouTube channels, one of your YouTube videos that you did in your channel. The question that was asked was, is there a specific industry that's really good for people like buyers to target, or is there a specific company size? Maybe just like dig into that. I know you answered that question. People can go to your YouTube channel to get that, but it's kind of interesting.
Um, so I think there isn't one good sector for everyone.
Hmm.
Um, there is a good sector for an individual again, right? For a specific person. Because I can show you people who made billions of dollars in pretty much any sector you can think about. Like I like to mention the story about Chubani, the yogurt company. I don't know if you heard about it, or the viewers heard about it, but it's $1 billion company that started from someone who bought a business using an SBA loan.
Yeah,
Company
yeah,
used to do like few millions a year, and now it's like a multi-billion-dollar company
mm,
selling yogurts.
yeah,
So, if someone would ask me right now what's the best sector, and I would tell him, hey, yogurts are great, go and sell yogurt,
yeah,
they'll look at me like crazy. But for
mm,
that specific person, that sector was perfect,
yeah,
right? I don't know why, I don't know how. That's probably got a lot to do with him and his story and his background and his passion. So I
mhm,
think everyone have some kind of uniqueness, some more than the others, obviously. And it's about finding what's best for them. But even then, I think business comes down to more than just the sector that you're in. And I think in the end of the day, business is just business. It doesn't really matter what sector you're in. But what is business in? If it's making sure more money is coming in than money going out, and it's providing service and adding value to a specific sector or community um, with your product or services. So what I tell a lot of time to my clients is focus more on the the how of how you do the work versus on the what kind of sector you're going to be part of, right?
mhm,
Make sure that you do good work, make sure that you focus on providing value and adding more value than anyone else to your sector. I don't care what it is, because that's what's really going to make you fulfilled as a buyer. It's more about how you do the work that you do in whatever sector you're going to be part of, and how
mhm,
you're going to be the best leader you can be for the team that you have. So that's my answer to what is the best sector. I don't think there's one best sector for everyone. I think I can show you someone who says having restaurants is the best business in the world. I only going to have there's
yeah,
this Tillman Fertitta, I think is the name, right? One of the owners of the Houston Rockets. He owns like hundreds of restaurants. For him, that's the best business in the world. For someone else, uh, I've heard a lot of people say never go near restaurants. So
yes.
what's right here? There's no right or wrong. It's what's right or wrong for that specific individual, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's like such a good answer. One of the questions that I'm asking, because we're like kind of coming to the top of the hour here, but one of the questions I'm asking to everybody on the summit is if there was kind of one thing that you could zero in on that's going to make a seller of their business the most successful when they go to actually sell their company, what would your suggestion be of that like one thing they should really drill down on?
So if they want to sell their company right now, I would say the best thing you can do is build a good business 5 years ago. Start there, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like the best time to plant a tree, right? It was 5, 10 years ago. Then the second best time is now. So
yeah,
um, if you don't have a good business, make sure you do have a good business with some of the things I mentioned. I think in the beginning, like
yeah,
um, you know, what can you do to de-risk it for the buyer, I think. And in the end of the day, just can you have a good business that provide a good service and value to a specific part of a community or clients. That's what it is all
Yeah.
about in the end of the day.
Yeah, like I guess that's sit down and ask yourself the question, what can I do to de-risk this business for the buyer?
Yeah.
I think that like, is really good sound advice. And then kind of before we wrap up, I know that you guys are working on some new projects and you're, always pushing new stuff out, whether it be content through your YouTube channel, or otherwise. It's anything that you want to kind of share with the audience right now that they should be, how to connect with you and, what you guys are working on.
Yeah, so we just launched our marketplace. So that's definitely our focus right now. I really want to bring acquisitions to the mass, and almost connect between generations. Connect between baby boomers who I'm sure we all who watch the summit knows that what's going to happen in the next few years with the baby boomers, and I want to connect them with people who want to own businesses. I want to see a world where everyone who is committed to own a business can get one. And just I want to make acquisitions like buying small businesses from baby boomers as cool as starting a startup that became like the coolest thing to do. I
Mm-hmm.
think that if we were able to do that, that would be a mission worth living for. So that's kind of like my mission with acquisitions.com right now, and we created that marketplace to hopefully connect between those generations. So yeah, you can go to acquisitions.com, or like you said, just check my YouTube channel if you want to see more random videos of me talking with yeah, on random topics.
No, and it's like incredible content. So I highly suggest people go to your YouTube channel and check it out. I also think the mission is really good because the startup community, it has this cool vibe to it, right? And there's definitely been a lot of investment, especially like government investment. And I'm Canadian, but from Canada and the U.S., there's a lot of resources put into that particular spot of the growth curve of a business. But there you have the curve, it's like grows, and then there's nothing at the top here. Like it could just potentially fall off the cliff, and it's kind of a complete shame because I think all that value's been created, and inside of it is the employees' jobs, and inside of it is like the support in the community, like you mentioned. That's all there, and it's already complete, right? So it's like getting these new leaders to think that jumping on at that point in the train station is equally as cool as getting on at the bottom, right? So yeah, good on you, man. I love it. And thanks
Thank you.
again for being on the summit. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll see you in a bit.
Awesome, man.
All right, that was